poll questions that we'd like to start with. So we're going to have Volker go ahead and put up the first poll question, and if we could get your feedback, that would be much appreciated. So we have the question here: have you attended an Autodesk product support webinar?
Well then, welcome back.
Absolutely. So we can go to the next question now. And so we have a few options here. What do you hope to gain from this session? Okay.
Well, we have
Thank you for that, and we'll go to the...
Got some honest people. I like that. All right, last question for now.
So most people wondering what it is, so we'll make sure to get that answered for you today. So at this time we're going to turn this over to Volker, and we will start here with our attribute session. Thank you everyone again.
Hi everybody, and thanks for attending. Had kind of a glitchy start there. I do apologize about that, but it'll work smoothly from now on. So we're going to start here with a couple of PowerPoints. And before we even get started with the attributes, I'd like to just point out a couple things. Please feel free to leave questions in the chat window. We're going to try and answer all we can as we move along, but we do tend to run out of time and can't answer all of those. So since we do want to answer those questions, we do have a feedback page, and Sean will be pasting this link and the following link in the chat window for you to be able to use. We will be checking this feedback page and answering as many questions as we can. And having said that, you can find that same link on our new landing page. This is where we're going to be posting all the upcoming webinars as well as links to the recorded ones that we have available. So it should make things a lot easier. If you enjoy these webinars, I would maybe bookmark the page and just check back every couple of weeks, every week. We'll have 4 more. Right now there's only 2 on there, but we are updating it, and there should be more than that available soon. Let me just kind of show you what those look like real quick, depending on the speed of my browser, that is. So basically this is it. There's Sean's happy mug. Not sure who that guy is. And there we have our videos, the recorded sessions, and here you can also get to that feedback link. So I encourage you to leave any feedback or check out that page for future webinars. All right, that being said, let's take a look at attributes, which is what you're all here for. So it seems most of you are familiar with attributes. I'm going to be starting at the beginning with those, though, and in doing so, let's talk about what an attribute is. All it is a non-graphical piece of text or a label that is attached to a block. It doesn't have to be attached to a block. I've made attributes that are nothing more than text labels that I can insert and change the value of the text in order for me to extract the data for those labels, perhaps. We can use or commonly see these attributes used in title blocks, but they can also be used in other symbology, such as parts, and maybe you want the part numbers, the prices, manufacturer, owner's names, comments, anything. All this information can be attached to a block, and then later on we can extract this to a table in the drawing or to an external file. Actually, you can do both at the same time. When you extract it to an external file, you have some choices. One of those is actually an Excel spreadsheet, and using that Excel spreadsheet, you could even update the table again externally. We're not going to do a round-trip source with the table or anything, but you'll see how it works. I will be creating both a table and an Excel spreadsheet, and in a future webinar, we'll probably talk more about tables and the styles involved. So with attributes, just like anything else, there are numerous commands we can use to work with attributes. The first one, of course, is we need to be able to define one, and for that we use the @def command. All of these first 5 commands are found on the ribbon, and they are commands. The edit attribute is actually the enhanced attribute editor. In addition to the enhanced attribute editor, we have another one called the block attribute manager, or commonly seen as Batman. I don't have that on the list here, but you'll see it in action. We also have a command to make our attributes display in the drawing or not display. So basically it turns them off as if you were turning a layer off. We can synchronize or update the attributes if we make a change to one of them in a block. The problem with the attributes, it's not a problem, it's just how they work. We can easily redefine a block, but if that block has an attribute, then other blocks with that attribute will not update once we've redefined it. You actually need to synchronize them to update the changes. This used to be rather difficult in the past. I think it was prior to 2005. I actually can't remember when the block attribute manager was introduced, but in the earlier days of AutoCAD it was pretty difficult to, or not difficult, but tedious to update our attributes. We can extract attributes using the Enhanced Attribute Extraction Wizard, or EAT text. I always like that one. And then we have some system variables. ATTDIA, that's for attribute dialog. So when you insert a block which has attributes attached, you are prompted for values for those attributes on the command line if @DIA is turned off or set to 0. If you have it set to 1, which is the default nowadays, then you get a dialog displayed. There may be times where you have to insert a whole bunch of the same block in a drawing, and you don't want to spend time filling out the attribute information. You want to go back and do it later. You can do so by changing the system variable attribute request @rec from 1, the default, to 0, off. That way you won't be prompted for the attribute prompt itself. There are many other commands and system variables which relate to attributes. Anytime you're in one of these commands, just hit F1 or do a search for attributes in the help system and you'll see all the related functions.
Just as a side note on that too, Volker, just to add on to that, with AutoCAD 2015 there's a great new feature with the command line that lets you finish any commands that you start at the command line. So if you're interested in all of the attribute variables, if you just type ATT, as Volker's doing now, you'll see that it will start to pop up and populate for any of the different ones. So if you're interested in what other commands there are to control attributes, that's a great way to do it. And you can start to learn some other ways of things that we won't have time to get to today.
And if you're running earlier versions of AutoCAD, so that was a good point, Sean. If you're running earlier versions of AutoCAD, just use the tab key after you've typed in something like ATT. And for each tab, it'll go to the next command or system variable that is related. So lots of little shortcuts available. Anyway, good point. Thank you, Sean. So let's take a look here. We have a drawing of a floor plan, and in it we have a bunch of furniture. And it's kind of difficult to tell what these are. I mean, it's a chair. You have a desk. This is obviously a cubicle of some kind. And we could certainly hover over a layer here. In this case, the layer name is cubicle, so we can tell. But we really don't have any other information. What kind of a table is it? Who's the manufacturer? What's the cost of this cubicle or the chair? Is the chair some kind of a luxurious office chair or your generic, this is for my interns type of office chair? We would like to have that information and make it available. One way to do this is to apply attributes to our drawing, the objects in our drawing. And there are several different ways to do this. If I take a look under the Home ribbon here, you'll see that under the block command here, we have several different options for attributes. Here we can define our attributes or type @def. This is the Batman command, Block Attribute Manager, for modifying after the fact. @sync, Retain Attribute Display, or @disp. And then we have some tools here for modifying attributes. Now this block here, I'd like to add some information to it. I'd like to go ahead and put an extension for the phone. I'd like the employee's name to be attached to it so I know who it's been assigned to, perhaps even that employee title, what department that employee is in, and what the cost of the phone is. Maybe I'd even want manufacturer of the phone on there. In this case, this is not a block. We could easily just modify it in the block editor. But I'm just going to do everything from scratch right now. I'm going to go ahead and add those attributes. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we have a proper text style. We always want to use a unique text style. You start using something like standard. If somebody else opens up your drawings and they have a unique font for standard, the attribute text, just like regular text, would appear different than what your expectations were. So I've defined a text style called VCAD for whatever reason. And right now I'm going to go into the attribute definition dialog. And you'll see where I'm talking about the text style here in a minute. Now this dialog here allows us to have some unique control over how our text is displayed. So I'll talk first about the modes. Invisible makes that attribute invisible. Nobody is able to see it. However, you can override that function with the @disp command. And I can show you that after we get done creating some of these. A constant is a fixed value. So once I insert the block, if the attribute has a constant assigned to it, then the user is not prompted to change that value. In fact, the user doesn't even see that value until it's been inserted and if it's visible. Verify, to me this is a very redundant feature. I've never used it because basically after I insert a block, it pops up a prompt, dialog or command line. I enter a value and then it pops up again just to verify that is this really what you wanted. So kind of redundant, but somebody has a use for it. Preset, the value is seen by the user, but that user is not prompted for it. But going back in to the attribute editor, we can then modify the value. So it is different from constant. It acts the same way, but it can be modified by the user. Constant cannot. You have to edit the block in order to change the constant value. Lock position basically locks the attribute to the location that you've placed it in the block. What would happen in the past prior to this being available is that one could select a block and a grip would appear for the attribute, and one could move the attribute outside of the block. So we have this option to lock it. It depends on how you want to use the attribute. Do you want it fixed or not? So you have an option there. All right, moving on to the attribute itself, creating a tag. What is a tag? Think of an attribute as a field or record in a database, and you're always going to have a tag in a database, which would be the header of that particular column or record in the database. So we also have to think about how we apply a tag to an attribute. There's a limitation to characters. I'm not sure what it is now. At one time it was 32 characters, and it may be up to 64 now. I'm not positive about that. But anything will be changed to uppercase automatically, and you cannot have special characters. Underscores are good, but like an @ symbol or something like that you can't have, and you can't have spaces. I'm going to go ahead and fill this one in with an extension. Whoops. And the prompt is what the user sees. So I'm going to go ahead and type in enter phone extension. There is also some limitations you need to be aware of. Basically, in the attribute dialog box, if you make this prompt too long, it'll actually get chopped off. And I do believe it's 32 characters on that. A default value is something that the user is going to see if you do not put your own value in there. So in this case, I usually tend to put in some kind of a character signifying what type of value it is. I could even predefine a number in there, but I just use 3 numbers to indicate that's the type of value I want. You could, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a really key point, because a lot of times what will happen is you'll enter your attributes and you'll show how to add those in a little bit. But if you have a default value, even if you leave that blank when you're inserting the attribute, it's going to show up with whatever you have for the default value. So we get a lot of questions from folks asking, why do I have a value there when I didn't enter anything? And it's usually because there's a default setup that somebody else might have added and the user wasn't aware of. So it's important to note that that's a good thing to have, because it's a visual reminder that there's something there. But there are times when you just really do want that field to be blank, and if you have the default value in there, it's going to show what you've entered. So it's just a good thing to remember that there's times when you want that on or filled in, and there's also times when it's probably better to have it blank.
Right, thanks, Sean, and that's exactly it. I always put a default value in there, just especially if I'm inserting a whole bunch and I want to go back later and fill in the values. That way I don't miss something. You know, I need a value here of some kind. That's what I'm saying. You can also insert a field. We're not going to get into fields. I'm doing a webinar on fields in a couple of weeks where I'll discuss this more, but you could add a field for a attribute value. You could also have multiple lines in the most recent versions of AutoCAD. I forget when that was introduced, AutoCAD. I'm kind of anal about how I place my text. So in this case, I'm going to use middle center. And again, I've defined a style just for my attributes. Do not make these annotative. You can, but the block itself, if it's annotative, it will make that attribute annotative as well. You know, that's just inheritance. If you make the attribute itself annotative, you may end up having problems with the appearance of the block attribute within the block. So I do recommend you do not do that for attributes embedded within a block. I'm going to change the value to 0.5 here, and I'm going to click OK. I left the default specify on screen, and now I'm just going to go ahead and place this extension on to the drawing of the phone. And I actually moved a little too far over, too much coffee, I think. Now I'm going to go ahead and repeat the command, but this time I am going to make the next value invisible. And that value, I don't need people to see the employee name. Maybe I do, but in this case I don't. So I'm just going to go emp name. Oops. And I'll put in a default L name, comma, F name. And I'll go ahead and position this using a middle left, same style, same text height. I'm going to click OK. And I'm just going to reference the midpoint of this just to be a little bit anal. And I've placed that. I'm going to go ahead and do one more for this purpose here, and we'll just, the finished attribute that I'll show you later, or block with attribute, has a lot more information in it, but we'll just repeat this one more time. I'll leave this invisible, and this time I'm going to go ahead and set it to preset so that I'm not prompted for the value of that particular block or attribute. And the reason why is it's the cost. And we'll go ahead and just keep this under $150. And this time, I'm not going to touch any of this actually. This time, I'm going to go ahead and select this little checkbox, and you'll really like this. I'm just going to click OK, and it places it in alignment underneath the original attribute. Now, note extension, emp, and cost. Those are the three values in that order that I added. I'm going to go ahead and use the block command right now, and I'll grab it up here just for visuals. And we'll call this, well, let's just call it a phone. I'll go ahead and pick a base point. I'll go ahead and select the objects and leave it with a convert to block. Oops, did I select my base point? I may have gotten ahead of myself, everybody. Sorry about that. Pick. There we go. All right, select objects. Actually, let's do it this way. Go from bottom to top, just for grins. The rest of this I'll leave as is for right now, and I'll click OK, and up pops my Edit Attributes dialog. The only time you're really going to see this particular dialog nowadays is when you type it in manually, which is DDATTE or ATTE, whichever you prefer. or when you insert a block. Now, what's wrong with this picture? That's right, these are all out of order. The cost we entered last. This is in the right order, but this isn't. So what happens is, and this is important if you, let's say for a title block, you're trying to make sure that everything is consistent. You want people to enter things in order, or you've got your most relevant information to be entered first. You want the order that you define them in. Well, what happens is when you select something like this with a window, it creates an arbitrary selection set. You're selecting it the way AutoCAD sees. So when I originally created this, I should have selected the block itself, the object, the graphical parts, and then selected the attributes in the order that I want them to appear. It's actually kind of tedious if you have a lot of attributes. What we can do, though, and there's a couple of ways to do this, is we can use a command called BAT order, and this stands for block attribute order. You can get to this two ways. The easiest way for me at times is just to go into the block editor and typing in BAT order. It starts to pop up on my command line. I hit enter, and the attribute order dialog pops up. Here I can move items up or down, reorganizing them. And this used to be a difficult thing in the past. We'd have to do this manually, redefine the block. So this is a cool little bit of functionality. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to close the block editor. Now, I'm just going to double click on this, and this brings up the enhanced attribute editor. You'll see that these are still out of order, and that's because we haven't updated the drawing database yet. I'm going to click cancel. The way we do that is by going to the synchronize attributes command, or @sync. This prompts us to give the block name, or we can just hit enter to select. So I'm going to go ahead and select the block. Yes, I do want to sync that, and that's on the command line down here. So I'll hit enter again. And now if I double click this, everything is in the order that I want it to be. This dialog also gives us options to change the text style, the justification and height, anything about the text itself, as well as what layer it's on, if we want to assign a color to it, or line type, line weight, any of the generic properties we can modify through here. Again, afterwards you have to synchronize that block with the other ones, so you'd have to go to @sync again. A way to get around that is the second way to reorder your attributes, and that's through Batman. This will allow me to reorder, modify, and synchronize the block after the fact. So it's a very great tool for changing that. Enhanced Attribute Editor, going back to it, just by double-clicking the block, because it has an attribute in it, it takes me to this. Here I can change the value. So there's quite a few ways for us to modify our attributes. In the block editor, you could select the block and use the properties palette to change things. Here you can also change any face values in the property manager for the values themselves. Sorry, in the block editor it would be for the attribute definition. Here it's for the value. So a lot of quick ways to change things. So let's take a look at this here in action now. I'm going to go ahead and go over to my office. Actually, I need to go here. I'm going to open up a tool palette, Control 3. And what I'm going to do is just drag and drop this onto my tool palette. Oops, got to save it first. User error. All right, there we go. All right, so I've got the phone there. I'll now go over to my office, and I'm going to go ahead and go into Properties and assign a layer. I did forget to create my phone layer, so I'll just put it on Miscellaneous right now. And click OK. And we'll go ahead and insert that block. And there's my attribute dialog. So if I don't want to deal with this every time, okay, I can go ahead and type in ATT REQ. I'll set that to 0, and I'll repeat the command pick, and so I'm not prompted for that dialog. The only thing is, you do have to remember to turn it back on later on if you want the prompt to appear. Note the value right here. And what I'll do is just to demonstrate real quick, this isn't, whoops, wrong one. This is not something you'll be doing often, but sometimes you don't want people to see all that information, maybe in a check plot. Maybe you've got some information that's not going out to customers, but you want to hide it because it is in the drawing. So here we could hide all the attributes, and none of that phone extension value appears. Again, you should remember to turn that back on afterwards. So click Display All Attributes. Will show them even if they're invisible. So be aware of that. Maybe you do want to see all that information internally. And of course, retain is the normal stage. Any questions so far?
We don't have any questions in the chat window, so I just wanted to reiterate that if there are questions, that's where you can put those, and we'll make sure to get to them. I did also want to make note that I did post 2 links in there, and one of them is a link to previous sessions, and that ties in because what Volker just showed in copying the blocks to the palettes, we went over that in detail in one of the previous sessions. So if you wanted to see a little bit more about that and how that can be done to maybe build a block library, there is a prior session. So just as a side note, that those are all recorded. So, but as for this session here, there's no current questions at the moment, Volker.
All right, thank you, Sean. So what we're going to do now is put this all together, and in order to do that, in order to save time, I've created a different drawing. These blocks have some same kind of block, but it does have some additional values in it. Okay, so we have a cost, a department, employee title, employee name, and extension number. So the first two are the same, and then the last one is the same as well. But all of these blocks already have values within them. And what I want to do now is create just a table, a schedule, so to speak, or maybe even a bill of materials of the items in this drawing for accounting purposes, or just inventory purposes, period. And we can easily do this using the enhanced attribute extraction wizard. In the past, this was kind of cumbersome, and unfortunately, AutoCAD LT still uses the functionality of the older versions of AutoCAD, where we had to set up a text template and make sure we had all our formatting proper, and then it would export things. AutoCAD itself has this neat tool for extracting attributes, and we will find this on the Insert menu under Linking and Extraction, Extract Data. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my D-size layout. And of course we have our blocks here, and of course we'd probably want our schedule or inventory list, whatever, on our layout where we're going to plot it. So I'm going to go extract data. I could also type eat text. I'm going to create a new data extraction. If I had previously done this, I could use that template that I previously predefined and even modify it a little if I needed to, or a previous extraction itself. So this is a template. This is an existing data extraction where it also creates a template, but it's new, so I'm going to click Next. I'm going to save this in a location that I can easily find, and we'll call it @ext just for grins, and click Save. So here are some settings we need to change. If we have a drawing set, we could include the current plus additional drawings in that set. So we may have a whole bunch here, say if you're in a sheet set. We can select specific objects in the current drawing, which I would want to put a window around this if I were to do that by going into the model first. I could add additional drawings or a whole folder of additional drawings. We also have some settings here, and so we can extract objects from block, that's a default, extract objects from XREFs, so any blocks within a XREF, and include those XREFs as counts. So this is a great tool for counting particular blocks. We can say all objects in the drawing or just objects in model space. I don't need to uncheck that, but I'm going to just because it's there. I'll click OK. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. It checks the drawing. Now here it shows me all the objects in my drawing, and I could easily deselect objects here, but if this list were real long, it would be kind of tedious as well. So I'm going to tell it, look, just display blocks with attributes only, and only those currently in use. I'm going to uncheck display all objects types, and I'll go ahead and uncheck the title block. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. And here again, it's giving me all kinds of information that I could uncheck. So X, Y, Z location, the line weight, line type scale, layer information. In fact, anything about the drawing can be extracted with this utility. What I typically tend to do, because I don't need all that, is I uncheck these. And for this purpose here, I just need the attribute information. Once I've done that, I could deselect some of those if I needed to, but I want everything there. So I'll click Next. And it gives me a table view of the data that it will display in the table that I'm going to create. I really don't need to see the name column here. I could keep it, and maybe for this example I will, but I don't need the count in this case. I don't need to know how many there are. So I'll do a uncheck for the show count. I could uncheck the phone name as well. Right-clicking over one of these columns also gives you some additional functionality. So how to sort it. You can rename the column, so if you want it to be a little more readable, instead of a database format, you want it to be something other than the tag of the block, you could easily rename that. Count column show name column, same checkbox here. You can also set a data format such as currency, whole numbers, angles, etc. I'm just going to click cancel on that. We can link this to an external spreadsheet, some sorting options, and we can also do a full preview, but this is pretty WYSIWYG right here. I'll click Next. Here's where I tell it I only want it to be a table, or I only want it to be an external file, or both. I'm going to go ahead and select both. And so by default, this is where the Excel file is going to go. I really want it to go elsewhere. I'm going to go ahead and select the name. And I'll go to this folder here. I copied it in there. I'm going to click Save. Then I'm going to click Next. Oops. Let's go. This is kind of what, well, it is what my table style looks like. I created a unique style for this as well instead of using the standard table. It's always a good idea to create unique styles. So here I'll go phone, log, whatever. Could have called it Fred. I'll leave all this the same because I've applied this in my table style. Click Next, and then I'll click Finish. It's now generating that table, and I'm just going to plop it right there, and there's my table. So, pretty cool as far as that goes.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, Volker, and that was a great demonstration. This is one of those features that we don't seem to see a lot of users taking advantage of. It's one of those features that can seem a bit overwhelming and confusing, and so I think that tends to make a lot of folks shy away from it. But if you're using attributes quite a bit, we really recommend looking into this tool and really learning how to use it, because as Volker just showed on a small scale, it's a great way to gather information and make that available. So don't let the seeming complexity of the tool scare you away. It really is a great way to gather information from your files.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. It is. It's a wonderful tool, and it is so much simpler than it has been in the past with this attribute extraction wizard. Another nice thing is that if I were to make a modification to one of these blocks, let's say I changed the value from $49.95 to $149.95 for the conference room phone. Once I change that in the block, I can run that attribute extraction wizard again, and it'll update this table to reflect that. So, and that would be just using that same template. So, yeah, a very cool tool, very powerful. Like anything else in AutoCAD, though, attributes as well as tables are all something, you know, you need to work with a little bit. You need to play with, take a look at the help file, and just use it to get comfortable, get that warm fuzzy going. Okay, well, I think that's about it. There's a lot more to this, and there are many different ways to this. So the way I've done it, it's maybe not always the right order of doing things. Somebody may have a better preference than me, but this is the functionality and how it works. And again, like anything else in AutoCAD, it's a glossy overview because there's so much more to learn.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Volker. This was great. And so why don't we go ahead and we'll put up our final poll question. And while that's going up, I just want to mention again, if you do have any additional questions that you'd like to ask, there's a link in the chat window where Volker and I will be heading over to answer additional questions. So if you think of anything within the next hour or so, we'll be there live. If it's beyond that, still feel free to post a question, and we'll be able to go back and look at those questions after the fact. So,
yeah, I do get notified, and also in the follow-up email from GoToMeeting, thanking you for attending. Those links will be available there as well when you get that email. So let me run this poll. Sorry, I forgot to click the button. User error. And oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, most folks saying yes. That's great.
Yeah. We, Sean and I, and our whole product support team really appreciate you guys attending these webinars. And in that feedback form, please feel free to leave feedback as to what features you may want a webinar on as well. We'll try to accommodate. But we know your time's valuable, that you are busy, so we do appreciate you being here.
Yep, we do have one question, Volker, just before we wrap up.
Yeah, certainly.
From Vince. He asked, how does the performance of the data extractor scale? So, for instance, if you're doing that over thousands of CAD files, how does that work?
Well, that's a loaded question. Thank you for asking. It's it's going to depend on so many things. The resources. Is it on the local drive? Is it on the network? I'm sure there's going to be a limitation. I haven't done thousands of drawings, so I cannot honestly answer that. I would hesitate to answer it just because that's kind of scary. It performs well with large amount of drawings. I couldn't give you a limitation. Can't tell you how much performance is going to decrease. It depends on the data in the files, graphic cards even, what it's trying to regenerate on the screen as far as the table goes. It's all processing power.
AutoCAD is sort of built that there's very few limitations really built into AutoCAD in terms of how many files you can use or that sort of thing. But as Volker said, there may be a limit that you do reach where you start to notice performance slipping a little bit, and that's just going to be based on your settings, the size of the files, the complexity of the files. So there's no built-in limits, but you may notice some things depending on your own settings.
And because it's going to be working on the hard drive, gathering all this information in a temporary file, one of the best things I can recommend is to make sure you have that extra room available on the hard drive, that the hard drive has been defragmented, and that you have a good Windows paging file, good size permanent paging file available, so that the Windows resources are not being forced to work extra hard. Defragmentation is a big thing.
Yeah, we did also have somebody commented they came in a little bit late, and if this is going to be recorded. So it was recorded. There's a link in the chat window to where those are posted. On the page where it says additional webinars, there's a link there. That lists all of the future webinars that are scheduled right now in the content, and it also has recordings of any prior webinars that we've done. So yes, this is recorded and it will be posted.
Yeah, it should be about 24 hours. It'll be up.
Okay. And the last thing I wanted to mention just is a little bit of promotion here, but for anybody not aware, the registration for AU, Autodesk University, did open this week. So if you have not attended before, that's a great networking event, but also on a personal level, Volker and I will both be there as well, teaching a few classes on our own and also a few classes together. So if you're enjoying these webinars, then we hope that you also can hopefully attend AU in December, and we'd love to meet you personally and continue talking about AutoCAD.
Yeah, feel free to stop us in the hall, buy us a drink. All right, unprofessional.
So the link is up there for Q&A, and again, I did post it in the chat window. So that'll wrap up for this week, but thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Actually, one more thing, Sean. Next week, we're going to be working with annotation scaling, so just a heads up. Have a great day, everybody.